Welcome to week 7 of PSHS 6240 here at George Washington University. Just a couple of things, announcements. February 23rd, we're doing the terrain walk. Again, at 9, I'm going to start, group 3 is going to go at 9 o'clock. Their presentation will be about 20 to 25 minutes. So at 9:30, we'll go ahead and start that. However, if you are in groups 1 and 2, I would recommend watching group 3's presentation, so you get an idea of what I'm looking for the final paper. If you're going to talk about intelligence failure and the post 9/11 intelligence failures that we've seen. So February 23rd at 9 o'clock for group 3, 9:30 for everyone else. In your announcement, please let me know if you are going to attend that. So give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. ChatGPT. I want everyone to listen to this very carefully. I believe someone used ChatGPT for the last paper. If you don't know what ChatGPT is, it's the AI-enabled question. AI-enabled answer question online. I'm going to give an amnesty right now. If you use ChatGPT for an answer in a discussion or a paper, let me know. Okay? I'm going to give you an amnesty, and I'm going to say, okay, you'll do a rewrite on whatever assignment it was. And the reason I say that is because, again, I've put in some of the questions into ChatGPT, and there were answers that were remarkably similar. So I'm going to give you an amnesty. You come to me, and then we can work through a paper on that. Just be honest. If you don't come to me, I'm going to turn over what I've got to the university, and they're going to decide whether it was plagiarism or not. And what I mean is, if you asked a question to ChatGPT and then made some slight changes to the answer, that's still plagiarism, okay? Just like if you copy and pasted a Wikipedia page and then made some slight changes. Again, if you did this, you got amnesty, but say so as soon as possible, okay? So paper 2, again, all of you have it back. Just some issues. Again, there's specificity in these papers that you need. I don't want general WMD issues, general WMD. Each one of these scenarios that you saw had a certain agent, whether it's chem, whether it was plague, whether it was ricin, and there is science in that about those agents that make them easy to disseminate, hard to transport, easy to employ, hard to employ, however you want to couch it. But you need to get to that specificity. Again, you have to talk the impact of the science. If you're talking about ricin, you do have to talk about castor beans and the yield from castor beans and how easily it's transported, and whether you think it could cause a mass casualty event or, as most of you said, it'll cause a mass or a targeted assassination. But you need to explain how the science leads to that conclusion. Get into those levels of detail. And then, as I mentioned, think of the coronavirus. And I mentioned this on a couple of facets. One, imagine it's March 2020 and you have to explain or write something so your boss can explain the coronavirus and the issues surrounding that. That's what's going to happen for any of these case studies that I assigned you, or these WMD case studies. Someone's going to read about this laptop of doom, and then they're going to think, well, is this really bad? Is it not bad? How hard do I worry about it? So you want to give your leadership language so he or she can go in front of the press and say, yes, this is what was in the news, but there's no need to panic. Here's why, X, Y, Z. That's what happened in the early days of the coronavirus. A governor is not going to know about coronavirus. He's going to expect someone from you to write a quick fact sheet so he can explain that to his or her constituents. So that's number one. And number two, I would say, since we've all been through the coronavirus, especially if you're talking about like plague or other biological events, pin it to the coronavirus. Explain it in a way that, knowing that everyone now has a little bit of a background on the coronavirus. So let me give you an example. If you're going to talk about plague, you would say, well, this is plague, but it's not as transmissible as the coronavirus, but it is far more fatal, but there's a antidote to it. So think in the lines of contrasting that with coronavirus. I give you another example, monkeypox. Many of you might remember it over the summer. Everyone thought at first, oh, is this another coronavirus? And it's obviously not going to be like that, because it's, you need a very, one is a close contact to spread. You need to be at a very close level. It tends to focus on through sexually transmitted diseases. So, unlike the coronavirus, monkeypox is X, Y, and Z. Just pin those things to the coronavirus so someone can understand it in that depth. So week 6 review, are we more secure since 9/11? I hope so. We've spent billions, trillions, depending on how you count it, on mitigating 9/11. And this kind of goes with the week 5 assignments and the week 6 assignments as well. But we probably still need ways to go, and we'll talk about that in a second. What do you do? I brought this up in the discussion or in the lecture. What do you do if you get, let's say you brief, just like you saw in the National Geographic, Bin Laden determined to attack the U.S., and then the president comes back to you and says, okay, what do you want me to do about it? Oh. You should have an answer ready whenever you're briefing, particularly if you're an intel person, and you're briefing to a policymaker or a military leader, and you're briefing him whether it's something as big as 9/11 or force protection issue or anything along those lines, so they can bracket the problem. So you can say, Bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S., and sir, the severity of this, I would recommend increasing security around airports, or increasing port security, or doing something along those lines. That allows him to bracket the threat. Now, he or she doesn't have to follow your advice, but I think you should go in with a recommendation based on your intelligence. Was 9/11 an intelligence failure? Yes, no. If I didn't know about before I saw the NSA documentary, I would say maybe it's not an intelligence failure. Bad things happen. Not everything that's bad is an intelligence failure. But when I look, again, this is my opinion, knowing that we had those two, not Hamzi and Midar, on the radar of our intelligence community, that we knew that they were communicating with a known safe house, and that was in our government, yet we didn't go to detail on that. I think that's the intelligence failure. Fort Hood shooting, or we can talk about all these other lone wolf incidents, whether it's Islamic or right wing. What point should radicalization be monitored? Many of you said, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, that he should have been monitored further when he was communicating with Anwar al-Awlaki. That's a fair assessment. Anwar al-Awlaki was a known terrorist at the time. You're not just passively watching his videos, you were actually communicating with him. So he should have been put on a higher threat watch list based on that. But I'll ask the question, what if he was just watching Anwar al-Awlaki's videos? Should he be put on a list? I mean, that's free speech, right? We don't want to put people on lists for exercising their free speech. What if he liked an Anwar al-Awlaki YouTube video? Has he then crossed from free speech to interacting with terrorists? And then most of you would say, yeah, the next step, if he starts emailing or chatting or something along those lines, then he's crossed a certain threshold. But, it's easy to say that maybe for after the fact on Nidal Hassan, but what about right-wing extremists? If you've ever been to I hope no one's been to the comment section on Breitbart or on the Daily Stormer, you will see all sorts of threats and all sorts of not just hate or racism, but I'm going to kill all the insert racial slur here. Should that person be monitored? Yes, maybe. What language does it go from free speech to being put on a list? And then you'd also ask the question, millions of people do that. If you monitored millions of people, you would need multiple FBIs and others to actually do that. So, what are the criteria when radicalization should be further monitored? Do we have the appropriate funding structures and personnel? I would just say we spend billions, trillions on this. If you're going to say we need to spend more, the first question is say we are already spending a lot. The national security state is probably, trillions of dollars if you throw in everything from the defense budget to veterans affairs to police and local police. Again, that's a pretty big order. And then do we just have to maybe accept it? There's only so much we can do about lone wolves. If in a country that is free and in some ways fetishizes guns, should we just accept that these incidents are going to happen, particularly if they're U.S. citizens? I don't know. I'll let you decide. And then I talked about the intelligence versus policy. I'm not going to get into detail here. But these are the questions that I'm looking for kind of in your final. Actually, let me put the last question here. The last question is, what do we do when people are on the radar of law enforcement? Similar to Nidal Hassan, similar to the Orlando shooter, or the many of the Capitol Hill were already on watch lists. So they're on watch lists already, but there's not enough to arrest or detain them. So what do we do about that middle? How do we close that gap? Or should we close that gap? That's something I want you to answer in your final papers. And that's a question you should be prepared to answer if you're going to do the Boston Marathon in 4 days. The Tsarnaev brothers were on the radar of law enforcement, but they weren't able to close that gap because they didn't do anything illegal or criminal until the Boston Marathon. So what do we do about that? And I'll expect some sort of answer on that. So week 7 preview, we're going to talk about leadership targeting. When does it work? Under what circumstances? And then we're going to talk about the domestic Islamic threat. Week 8, we'll cover some of the right-wing threat, but week 7, we'll talk about the domestic ISIS threat in detail as well, and right-wing extremism. We'll talk about that on Thursday in the congressional walkthrough, and then we'll talk a little bit more in week 8 as well. So, again, just two takeaways. Please, if you use ChatGPT, I'm giving you amnesty, but you got to come to me ASAP. Number 1. Number 2, I'll see you guys on Thursday, at least for Group 3, and hopefully more of you for the congressional walkthrough. And please comment if you're going to be there or not. Look forward to it, and if there's any questions or issues, let me know.